All right, so we're looking at political participation and specifically voting today. Um, of all the things, honestly, of all the things that I will end up teaching you in this class, the fact that you need to vote, that you should vote, that you should engage in terms of voting, hopefully be one of the things that you absolutely take out of this class because it's essential. Excuse me. When you look at traditional participation, the traditional aspect, the way people participated was just through voting. Every now and then they would work on campaigns. What's up? I am. Right there. This is the camera and it's pointed right there. They don't need to see my ugly mug. What's up?
So for the discussion, it says that the responses are due tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Oh, sweet. So we don't have to do this today, do we?
The quiz is due tonight for chapter. Quiz is due.
All right, hold on.
Chapter 8 quiz is due tonight. That's what I'm doing right now.
Are you ruining your video?
I don't really care about the video. I don't like the quality of the video doesn't matter to me. Let's see. So we can move that quiz.
For tomorrow?
No, I don't have time. We got to do it today. So you got to do both today. Sorry, because we just got behind, having lost them 3 days.
Do I have a discussion board too also?
You got 2 little tiny replies, man. It shouldn't take that long. Plus a little tiny quiz. It's not that bad. All right. So look, let me try to get through this because these PowerPoints are long, right? Voting was number one thing, but you could theoretically work for a campaign back in the day. Okay, most of the time, people didn't really exercise their political participation rights other than voting. Like you have the right to protest. That's peaceably assemble. That's actually in the First Amendment. Although we have seen that happen more and more, like it's increasing, right? We have all manner of sort of protests that happen in this day and age, right? So like if you're one of those people that like hate the NFL now because guys be taking a knee, like that is a constitutionally protected First Amendment right. Okay, so I guess you just hate the First Amendment. Okay, protest is something that's utilized. Again, like I said, it's utilized a little bit more now than what it was historically. But it's most of the time, protest is really about drawing attention to an issue, because protests themselves aren't necessarily successful in accomplishing anything, right? So like the women's the women's march after Trump was inaugurated, the Charlottesville, Virginia rally, which you might have some bad memories of now, but in reality, the rally existed in the first place to try to not get rid of Confederate statues. Like that's what the whole thing was over. And then it just got really racist on both sides, right? This is a graphic of political participation, right? What people do, and obviously you can see people that are participating are generally voting. Like that's the easiest thing. Like you're gonna, anybody in here 18? Are you registered to vote?
I am in my contract, but I haven't done it yet.
Okay, you have like 2 weeks to register.
I'm just turned 18.
You can register before you're 18. Yes, because if you turn 18 the day before the election, you have to register in the state of Texas 30 days in advance. So you can actually register in Texas 2 months before you turn 18. Okay? I have voter registration cards. If you would like, I will hand you one. You can fill it out and give it back to me. I will put it in the mail for you today. Because it's that important to me that you were registered to vote and you vote. Did you raise your hand, Sue? Are you registered?
I had my mom mail it in this morning.
Okay. Awesome. All right.
Mine?
What?
Can you do mine?
Yes, I will do, like the end of class. Seriously, we will get you registered to vote today. Okay? Because voting is really, really important. That's another word for voting is suffrage. Okay? Over the course of time, voting rights have been expanded in U.S. history, and they're expanded constitutionally, right? So initially, if you go way back to like 1787, you basically had to be a property owning white man in order to vote. The property owning aspect goes away. Then we allow black men to vote, and then we allow like women to vote, and then we lower the voting age to 18 from 21. We get rid of things like poll taxes and literacy tests. Voting becomes a lot more universal. Okay? Voting is actually an issue that's controlled by the states, and you need to understand that concept as well, because voting is a state-controlled issue. In fact, the state of Wyoming, for instance, allowed women the right to vote in, I believe, 1896, if memory serves, right? So more than 20 years before the United States allowed women the right to vote. Now, the reason for that is that one of the requirements in order to become a state is that you had to have a certain number of like eligible voters in the state. And Wyoming, if you know anything about Wyoming, no one lives there. No, like seriously. Like Wyoming has 6 times the population of Sugar Land.
6 times?
Yes. The entire state of Wyoming. The entire state of Wyoming.
Oh,
Which, by the way, is a rather large state, like size-wise. The entire state of Wyoming has just over 600,000, or roughly 600,000 people that live there. Sugar Land has over 100,000. Just the city of Sugar Land. Okay? Yeah. These are just the various amendments that actually like expanded the right to vote. Because again, voting is really important, right? Like utterly important. Like everybody needs to vote. I'm gonna tell you guys, I don't care, honest to God, I don't care who you vote for. I really don't. Right? Like, for the love of Jesus, please cast an educated vote. And when I say an educated vote, I mean like understand why you were voting for the person that you were voting for. Right? Like in 2012, if you were like, oh, I voted for Obama because he's a black man, that's a dumb reason to vote for somebody because of the color of their skin. Right? In 2016, if you voted for Donald Trump because you're like, I ain't voting for no woman, that's a dumb reason to vote. Right? Just because you don't want a woman to be president. Like, that's stupid. If they're good at the job, they're qualified for the job, you think they're going to do a decent job, vote for them. I don't care whether or not they're Republican or Democrat. I really don't. Okay? But just have an understanding of why you were voting for the person. Okay? Do need to understand historically, just because we've expanded voting rights doesn't mean people always got them. Obviously, black men got the right to vote with the 15th Amendment in 1864 or 5, I think it was 1865 or whatever year it was. Yeah, that went away with poll taxes and literacy tests for a long time until we get to like the Voting Rights Act and the expansion of civil rights in the 1950s and 60s. All right. So basically, from like 1880 to 1960, roughly that 80 years, black men in the South had the right to vote, but they just weren't allowed to exercise it because there was things. Voter turnout. Voter turnout in the United States is actually relatively low, especially in comparison to other like democratic nations. But it's not. It's a little misleading. One, we actually calculate voter turnout out of like the voting age population. Not everyone in the voting age population is eligible to vote. So that's a factor. Two, we have a lower voter turnout because we have a number of elections, and we have really lengthy elections, right? So those of you that are 18, you're going to go cast a vote on November 3rd, right? And you're going to go vote for either Biden or Trump, and then you might realize that you're going to vote for John Cornyn or MJ Hager because those are your Senate choices in the state of Texas, right? And then you're going to vote for either Troy Nehls or Sri Preston Kulkarni because that's your House of Representative vote, right? And then all of a sudden you're going to be there for like 10 more minutes, and it's going to ask you to like vote for the 3rd district judge, and it's going to be 2 names you've never heard of, and you're like, I don't know, I've never heard of these people, right? And the fact that you've never heard of them is going to impact.
I'm never charging my computer until I
Oh my Lord.
I'm so sorry.
I don't care. I mean, I'm glad that like people don't steal your computer when you keep leaving it here. That's awesome. I'm glad this is an honest class. No, charge your computer. You need to charge your computer. Your computer needs to charge. You're good. And we also hold elections on one day. Now we do have early voting now, and early voting has become more prominent in the United States. but our official election day is a Tuesday, which means it's a work day. It's not a holiday. And so that negatively affects voter turnout. In fact, poor people generally can't afford to take the time off in order to go vote. Now, in order to combat that, we do have polls open, generally in most places from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., right? And the vast majority of us are not, like, working from before 7 a.m. to after 7 p.m., okay? Voter turnout in presidential elections is significantly higher than non-presidential elections, right? In fact, there's a video, I gotta figure out how to put it on D2L for you, but there's a video that I'm gonna put out to show you about that, to sort of show you the importance of voting, right? Because most Americans think, oh, we vote every 4 years. No, we vote like twice a year, every single year. You're just unaware of that. Right? We vote at least twice a year. Sometimes you can vote like 3 times a year, right? Or more, because there might be like runoff elections. Whoop. Yeah. This shows you voter turnout over time. The red line here is presidential elections. The green line here is midterms, meaning even numbered years in which the president is not being elected, i.e. 2018. But hopefully you realize it's significantly lower over here on this line, right? Digital participation, obviously social media allows for increases in political participation. It allows you to be more political. Candidates utilize social media a lot more. Like their candidates now hire people that are basically just like their social media account, like directors. Right? That just like Donald Trump doesn't do it. I'm pretty sure that man actually tweets for himself. But like most politicians and whatnot, like somebody else tweets for them, right? Because that's what they did, right? Again, it increases mobilization because more people can get involved. Digital media does have its problems, and I'm not even just talking about like sort of general online bullying between candidates, but digital media also it can skew sort of the outcomes of things because it's really easy to get on Twitter and like take a Twitter poll and be like, yeah, I'm gonna vote Biden, but you don't really care. Like you're not into voting Biden. You don't really care one way or the other. You're probably not gonna vote, but it was real easy while you're sitting there scrolling on your phone to click that you was going to vote in a presidential election, but then come actual election day, like you're not going to go do that, right? So the digital sort of space within politics, it's real easy to participate, but because it's so easy, sometimes it skews sort of results and outcomes because people aren't actually as engaged as what they seem to be, right? Offline participation, this is actually like attending meetings and like voting and working with candidates and volunteering on campaigns and doing all sorts of things like that. In reality, if you're actually like engaged, this is probably the better concept. Maybe except other than this last one, like you ain't gotta pay. Like I actually say this honestly. I've never given money to any candidate or campaign ever, nor will I. Right? Because it's just unnecessary. Okay. Some of the reasons, again, for digital participation, we talked about this, it's a lot easier to deal with. Okay. So it makes your participation easier and it makes you feel like you're more involved. Right? Politics is becoming more expressive, just probably not a good thing. I mean, it depends. Right? It's more expressive in the sense that people are like more vocal about it. If we're vocal about it in like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a civil way, that's not bad at all. The problem is a lot of us lose our civility, especially when we're sitting behind like a computer screen, right? When you're sitting behind a keyboard and you can just be like, "You're stupid," right? Because I mean, think about it. Like you see that all the time in political discussions. Like all the time, it just devolves into name calling, right? Like conservatives call liberals like snowflakes, right? And liberals just call conservatives racist, Like, no, because like you conservative now, according to liberals, you just racist, right? Okay. Some drawbacks to digital participation. Again, you don't know how engaged the people are that are participating because it's a lot easier to participate. You do have all kinds of like hate speech and harassment and some of those negatives that we just talked about. Like, it's not as ideal. But again, like another thing that I hope you get out of this class, like one of my little missions, right, as a teacher, especially as a government teacher, like I'm on a mission to try to like civilize, to try to make this to where you have a decent understanding of what's going on, right? And you're able to like engage civilly. Russian meddling, like it's probably important to talk about because it shows up on the news all the time, right? Sometimes, depending on what news you see, they'll be like, Russia hacked the election. No, they didn't. Okay, they didn't hack anything. They didn't go in and change people's votes. Okay, what did they do? They basically flooded digital platforms with a whole bunch of like false information, right? And most Americans are too stupid to go in, or maybe not stupid. I mean, a lot of them are stupid. But even the ones that aren't stupid, a lot of the times they're just too they're too busy. They don't have the time to go and like fact check things, right? Which is how you end up with in 2016, for instance. There's a whole thing about Hillary Clinton and how she was selling children into sex slavery in the basement of a pizza parlor, right? Did y'all know about that? You know, a dude actually showed up at that pizza parlor in D.C. and like fired off a gun and demanded access to the basement because he was going to save the children. What a hero. Yeah, there was no basement to that building, like at all. Like, people just make crap up. Okay. Who participates? When you look at voting, and specifically like people that vote, your socioeconomics and your demographics can actually like increase your voting participation. Minorities tend to vote less frequently than white folks because minorities tend to believe that the government is less responsive to them than white folks. Poor people tend to vote less than rich people because poor people think the government is less responsive to them. The political environment at the time can impact voter turnout and why people are voting, and then state laws can impact who's voting and when they're voting and whatnot, right? So socioeconomic status, again, the higher your sort of level of income, the more likely you are to vote. The higher your level of education, the more likely you are to vote as well. I would hope because as you get smarter in life, you realize that voting is wildly important, okay?